Test, test. Can everyone hear? I would say that I somewhat know what I want in life. I know that I want to be a good person, and in my mind, at least I know at least what constitutes as a good person. I am sure that a good person is considerate. I am sure that a good person is kind. And I want to live my life knowing with the circumstances that I had, that I lived my life with the best of my ability, that I fulfilled my desires, that I fulfilled my dreams at the best of the capacity that I could, and that I had the smallest ounce of regret possible at the end of my life. Firstly then, a few points of setup. We'll tell you that this debate is about an average person and on an individual level. We tell you that when the moment you consent to this AI, you're already happy to be able to oblige to whatever the AI asks you to do. This means then that you're likely to not oppose whatever the AI tells you to do. But secondly, what we have to defend then is not a society of AI-ran people, but rather on an individual level, I just have to prove that within status quo and the world I live in today, why I believe that the AI and why that I believe that allowing my life to be run by AI is something that is good and something that is worth it. So what does this AI technology actually look like? We tell you then that it would look like something that you could use from the age of 18 to around 25, and you can choose within that time frame at the point in which you want to take the assessment, at the point in which you want to use that AI to operate. These people have goals. I will tell you that as an individual, I would have goals. I would already have ambitions. I already have relationships established in my life, and I already have my fundamental values and my fundamental beliefs established. I tell you then that when people want to do things, the problem is that they do not know how to get there, and they do not know how to fulfill the deepest desires because of the crowding out of societal narratives and because of the deterministic world we live in. We tell you then that the AI would ask things in very, very extensive questions, right? This could also be over a long period of time in order to determine your values, your beliefs, and your preferences. We have the fiat to then say that the determination of your values and your beliefs and your preferences is likely to be accurate. We tell you then that the fundamental values would be determined by this AI, and in turn, all of these fundamental values will interact with your other values and will interact with all of the daily decisions you make on a daily basis. We tell the things that you are unsure of in status quo at the end of the day will eventually resonate with your fundamental values, and insofar as the AI identifies this, then it was likely to be fine. But we also tell you that the AI is able to filter through, for example, things that are extremely unrealistic and are not your true values, and some things that are absolutely BS. But people are also likely to be genuine to this AI because it determines the entire trajectory of their life, and in order for the AI to make decisions on and they also have to make it on what is available and the circumstances the individual is in as well. If the people believe that they can adapt, if they have a growth mindset, for example, the AI would do so as well. And insofar as it interacts with your fundamental values, it is fulfilling its purpose. First argument then on why we fulfill the deepest desires of human beings. In status quo, we tell you that there are a few deepest desires that people have, right? That people cannot actually do what they want, even though they know what they actually want. For example, a gay individual might have to debate between, for example, coming out of the closet and embracing their identity versus valuing their religion and valuing their family, i.e. having to choose what job you want at the end of the day, because society tells you that there are specific jobs that are good and specific jobs that are bad. But the question then is this my voice that is telling me to make this decision, or is it society's voice? Is it my parents' voice? Is it my family's voice? Is it my friend's voice? We tell you then that you always want it to be your voice, and you always want it to come and always inherently tie back to you. So even if you did know deep down what your fundamental values were, you didn't actually make decisions that actually reflected upon your values, because you didn't actually have free will. Because there's many mental calculuses that people do based off what decision they make. Firstly, on short-term benefits, people are likely to be impulsive, even though what they choose to do at the end of the day might not actually really be fulfilling for them at the end of the day. This looks like, for example, even though I know that I should study, I will still doom scroll through my phone because I know that as a short-term pleasure I'll get. This is the type of irrationality, and this is the type of distractions that exist within status quo. But secondly, on societal narratives, right? Because we live in a deterministic society where different narratives emphasize different things over different periods of time. These narratives then are likely to overpower your core fundamental values. For example, it's just like us living in a capitalistic society that tells us whatever job we choose has to be the one that gives us the most money, that gives us the most quote-unquote well-being, even if it didn't truly reflect upon your fundamental values, even if you had to sacrifice your fundamental values in order to line your pockets up with money. These narratives then influence your actions, but your actions are something that you don't actually believe in. What this AI does is that it comes up with these alternatives even in circumstances where you feel trapped. Because the nature of humans is inherently that they will always err on the side of safety, that they'll always err on the side of safety in the instance where society tells you that there is a better thing to do, and you'll always be coerced by your community at the end of the day. But lastly then, the human mind is so limited, right? You don't actually are considerate of everything you know at that point in time, insofar as you always feel overwhelmed at the end of the day. For example, I might actually have more knowledge about this motion after people talk to me about it after the round, but I won't utilize it and I won't use it because I am overwhelmed when I was prepping, for example. But lastly then, we tell you that we actually preserve the principle of free will at the end of the day, because what free will actually constitutes is about doing what you want and doing what you believe in. Free will was never exercised within society today because, sure, society and circumstances can change at all points in time. What actually mattered and what actually preserved the principle of free will at the end of the day was that your values and your fundamental values will always prevail over any circumstance, over any obstacle that would happen at the end of the day. But insofar as society will always restrict you from this free will, insofar as society is inherently deterministic, that meant that free will is even more restricted in status quo. So even if it's true that free will is a facade, the facade was a good thing because it made people feel like they could choose whatever they wanted at the end of the day. And at least even if this free will was a facade, you capitalized upon that free will because you believed whatever you were doing, whatever action you were making at the end of the day, it was actually from what you wanted at the end of the day because it came from your fundamental and core values. How this manifests in status quo then is evident when, for example, you see old people telling you how much they regret how they didn't spend their lives in a certain way, about how unhappy they have been in their lives at the end of the day. We tell you then that the people will actually now believe and follow and believe what they're actually following and follow actually what they believe in because the AI recognizes your fundamental values. You make more decisions, you get actual utility out of. Individuals have and live more meaningful lives with less regret. Because at the end of the day, even if sure, in the worst case scenario, even if the decision you made actually wasn't the one that made you the most utility, for example, with an AI error, at least you believe that that was what actually gave you the most utility, and at least you believe that that was your fundamental values at the end of the day. We tell you then that we were able to live more meaningful lives at the end of the day. You were able to do what you want, and you were able to be proud of whatever you did in any circumstance, even if you felt trapped, even if you felt trapped by society, because that's what makes my life meaningful, and I would want to live a life that I know that I was actually proud of myself, and I tried my best in all of my circumstances to fulfill all of my desires. Proud to propose. The imperfections that we go through in our daily lives are exactly what makes humanity perfect. At the point in which you take that away inside government, that is when you lose what makes humanity perfect and you turn into an imperfect society. Before I move on to my arguments, let's get into a few pieces of setup then. My few responses will be integrated in here. So running by AI, what does this look like? It looks like integrating AI's decision-making into your everyday life, into your decision-making and your cognitive judgment, right? At the point in which you as an individual, they agree, can never reject what AI tells you to do. You have to defend unconditionally following whatever decision that AI gives you, and at the point in which what AI does is they answer a series of questions once. From that point on, every decision you make should be based on whatever the AI's answer is. You cannot oppose it, because at the point in which you oppose it, you're crossing the house. If you oppose it, AI is not running your life. So we reject PM's premise that you have a growth mindset involved in the AI. Because if the AI just tells you, you can do whatever you want, you can grow from this, that is not making decisions for you. That is not allowing your life to be run by AI. For example, if when the point which I answered the question at 18 years old, I like coffee more than tea. So I put into the AI, I like coffee more than tea. From that point onwards, the AI will use the fact that I prefer coffee to tell me to drink coffee every day. I will never have the opportunity to try tea, and I will never have the opportunity to oppose what the AI tells me to do. No, thank you. No, that the people that already know what they want in life will be symmetrical on both sides because they already know what their goals are. This debate is about individuals who are on the fence. They do not know what they want in life, and they want to get it. First argument, the no thank you, on why the use of AI is inherently problematic then. On the first layer, the AI itself is already problematic because at the point in which they answer a series of questions, there are 4 reasons why this is so bad. 1, you're the only individual answering the question, which means there are no checks and balances involved in your answering. You input what you think your answer is. For example, if I am an individual that wants to become a singer because my idol is Taylor Swift, I'm going to put into the AI that I want to become a singer. But I have no self-awareness that I am a bad singer at the point in which now AI makes decisions based on what you think you as an individual are, and we think that at the end of the day, that is just wrong. Number 2, the questions are inherently vague. It is incredibly difficult to pinpoint whether you as an individual are an extrovert or an introvert. It is difficult to pinpoint whether you like your family or money more. You are not at your stage in life where you are able to make these decisions, and you're not able to put and objectify unobjectifiable things in the very first place, because these things are subjective and you can't objectify these things in the very first place. Number 3, you have a lack of self-understanding. You don't truly understand how and why you as an individual feel. Why am I sad when I wake up in the morning? I do not know. Why do I feel guilty every day? I do not know. We think at the point in which you don't truly understand yourself, you can never ever answer these questions objectively, and you can never allow these questions to run your life forever. That is just indescribably stupid as an individual then. If their side of the house wants to talk about how, say, LGBTQ individual wants to make the decisions, society's voice comes into play as well. If I'm an individual that is afraid to come out to my family, I'm going to put into the AI that I'm afraid that I'm opposing my religion. So the AI is just going to use that fact and put into the decision making in the very first place. You're not going out of your comfort zone because you're answering based on what society tells you to do, because you are the one answering it. We think that lastly, it's unclear as to the emotional state of the individual that is answering the question. Are you mad or sad on the day? How can you truly know that you're objectively rational on the day that you are answering these questions? For example, if something bad happened to Taylor Swift on the day, I would feel incredibly sad. So at the point in which I would answer these questions, based on the fact that I am sad about the thing that happened to my favorite celebrity, at the point in which I say things that I don't mean, for example, that I prefer the celebrity over my family, that is not something that I want to carry on for the rest of my life, but that is just something that at this moment in time I feel. It is incredibly inaccurate, and we cannot take PM's point that AI is accurate because it is not. You don't answer questions objectively. And the second layer, about changing mindsets. We tell you as an individual, every single time, and over time, your values, beliefs, and preferences can change. At the point in which you are 18 to 25 years old, that is, say, not objectively at the point in which your behavior is solidified. It is not true. At the point in which your values change, for example, if you're a selfish individual at this point, but a life-changing incident happened to you that made you become a selfless individual. For example, your mother got into a car crash, and you understand, as a selfish individual, now becoming more selfless because the fact that my mother got into the car crash made me extremely sad and made me more selfless. At the point in which now you're forced to make decisions that you don't want to make because your past mindset was already integrated into the AI at the point in which you answered the question with your past mindset. Now you're forced to make decisions that you don't want to make. On our side, we promote things like character growth through things like experiences. It is good to adapt with society. At the point in which, for example, society is capitalistic, right? I as an individual need to adapt to that fact. I cannot forever stay in my past mindset and don't adapt with society because that is just bad and you cannot interact with your community and society. On the third layer, then, are more interactions. We think at the point in which the AI doesn't allow
allow changes in opinion because you answer questions once and it covers your life for the rest of your life. It doesn't allow for things like discussions because the AI is objective. The AI has to run your life. Two things happen then. One, you cannot interact with people properly because the only thing that you are following is the AI. The only thing that you are following is your mindset at the point in which you were answering the questions in the very first place. Number two, if your mindset was wrong at the point in which you were answering these questions, it would be wrong forever and you do not allow for character growth. If I was a racist individual answering the questions, I would be racist for the rest of my life and I would not have room to grow into a much better individual at the end of the day. On the fourth layer then, that the AI is a black box model. No, thank you, I'll take you after this. We don't truly understand how the AI makes decisions. You don't know if the decisions that the AI makes are good in the very first place. You cannot say that you have fiat on your side to prove accuracy because it was never stated in the info slide. We tell you that they never stated that the AI will make the best decision. We don't know how these decisions are made at the point in which you only answer questions like, are you an extrovert, are you an introvert? At the point in which you don't know how and why the AI formulates your decision making to this point in time. We don't see why this is good at all. Before I move on to my next argument, yes. Okay.
I think we have some form of fiat to say that this AI will make pretty good decisions because they say that they will make good decisions based off of what information you have. People would defend the best case and will be charitable.
Yeah, my next argument will be charitable then. Going on. Number two, why the counterfactual is better under our side. Let's say the AI is perfect. On the first layer, you still need to make mistakes to grow. Even if at the point in time where you answer the questions and the AI formulates an answer, you still need to grow, and it is still your mindset from the past, and it still does not allow you to grow. That doesn't change that fact at all. The way you live a fulfilling life is you fail, you try again, and you do better. Your growth comes from experiences, from discussions, no thank you, with other people. Every single time you make a mistake now, what happens is twofold. One, you would either blame the AI and say, oh, it is AI's fault that I made the mistake because the AI told me to make the mistake, even though the past experiences that you put in was from you, so it was your mistake, but you just blame the AI now. Two, you don't recognize the mistake because everything that you think the AI tells you is essentially something that you should do. The AI becomes unquestionable now. You just follow blindly and you don't learn from your mistakes. We tell you imperfections are what make us human, and their side takes that away when you make the AI answering questions an unquestionable model. Number two, comfort zones. The machine tells you to do what you are comfortable with. Two things happen. One, you never leave your comfort zone and you never take risks. An introverted individual will now never leave their house because the AI knows that in their comfort zone, you are comfortable with being introverted. Now you never meet the love of your life, you never meet your family, and you never live a fulfilling life. Number two, you never figure out what makes you truly happy because at the moment, what you think makes you happy might not actually make you happy. Back in primary school, I was an extremely emotional individual and sensitive individual, and I never imagined that I would be on this stage debating right now. At the point in which I was able to take risks and go out of my comfort zone, that is why I am here where I am today, and that is how I enjoy the things that I like right now. Thirdly, on the principle, we think that in the black box model, you should never let inanimate objects control your life because human beings are meant to be conscious beings, making our own decisions. That is how we grow, differentiate ourselves, and stand out. Without this, we are akin to robots following answers that the AI gives you. That is not living a fulfilling life. That is not being a human. We tell you imperfection is what makes humanity perfect, and that is what we stand for on opposition. So proud to oppose.
We're moving back to government. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to stand upon the case for the government team. You're here.
Is this okay? The way decisions have to be made are based on circumstances and how it interacts with your values and beliefs. We think what likely happens on our side of the house then is in the process of answering that AI in these questions, number one, we think we give them extensive periods of time to answer them. So in order to accommodate the possible different biases or possible different ways that your views can change in that particular time. But more importantly, panel, I just want to note one quick thing, is that if it is true that you have values in some places that don't align with certain biases, odds are you will be able to opt out. So for example, if you've been indoctrinated to believe that perhaps your sexuality is always bad, but then you still say that you're a bit confused, because that's what internal homophobia is in the end of the day, odds are that AI in the future will probably tell you, give you reasons as to how you can escape from that situation, and tell you how to actually rationalize and actually just sit back and confirm for yourself what it is. If you're not carefully, panel, that being open-minded, wanting to try new things are all values that people can have. Wanting to progress is also a value that you can have in general. Wanting to know more about individuals of other circumstances and empathize are all values that you can have in the end of the day. If those are your fundamental values that you put into the AI box, odds are we think that change can happen under our side of the house. It's not exclusive on their side of the house. I want to first frame them whether passion does exist in the debate or whether things can be clear-cut in the debate panel. Number one, I think some things can be determined immediately, right? Some things will inherently resonate with you at that time. In fact, if you're the person who they're answering that particular AI in that moment, I would suggest that the fact that you want to give this control to AI probably means that you want, and you are probably secure and know that what you want is probably what you won't regret in the end of the day if you hand it over to the AI. That means that you're likely to, number one, rationalize and confirm that these things are probably true. For example, I may feel good from helping people, but the thing is, Singing can't just frame people who know what they like out of this debate panel, because a lot of people know what they like and what resonates with them, but they don't know how to get there. I can like helping people, and that doesn't necessitate that I have to be a doctor panel. We can look at everything else, but the point is, you can put that in, and if it is true that whatever occupation you put in as another response to the AI, if that over time doesn't resonate with your other values, inherently you will opt out. Because note that you can also have things like, for example, wanting to be free and not wanting to be confined to a schedule, but also wanting to help people. That would just mean that it will slowly rule out all those careers that don't fit that in the first place. But moreover, panel, I think given that values change in the end of the day and you have to make decisions based on your circumstances, I think if the AI recognizes that, for example, and in that case, if you have some uncertainties put in there, if the AI is able to assume that you're likely to change after that, because that's how it knows you, if the AI is likely able to assume that you're going to change after this event happens to you, then odds are you consider that circumstance, it will consider that in the end of the day. Quickly, then, I just want to take out this idea on the black box that you want to push here. I think, number one, this idea about black box here, I just think it's not really true. It's not really relevant in the debate, because odds are, I would suggest that they base itself off of your answers in the debate. In the end, you're the one who puts in the answers, so in the end, I would suggest it's somewhat transparent. But what is more important, panel, in the end of the day then, is that I think that in these in terms of whether or not you're likely to put in what you generally believe, I think it is the case that, and I want to flip the idea that when you're the individual putting it in, I think that's exactly why you're likely to be genuine, right? Because if your mom is the one who puts it in, she doesn't know you as well as you do. Anyone else who puts that information in does not know you as well as you do. So also I do suggest that you're likely to actually give you a genuine answer. But more importantly, panel, I want to point out that given that social narratives are all around the world and they're able to coerce your decisions, the fact is that now that you're handing this decision over to that AI for pretty much permanently, that suggests then that if you don't agree with any social narrative internally, you're still likely to put that confusion into the AI in the end of the day. That just means then that on our side of the house, to the extent where those social narratives will continue to exist, perhaps the AI can find ways in which you can escape from those communities and find solace elsewhere. When they want to argue about LGBTQ individuals, about how if it is true they're so afraid, then they will continue closeted, I would suggest then that a value that they can support is wanting to have a meaningful relationship in the end of the day. They can also support wanting to have a meaningful life with a boyfriend or girlfriend in the future. That just means then that on our side of the house, AI will try to accommodate for their current circumstance, but also help them achieve that in the end of the day. What that means then, panel, is perhaps maybe they're stuck in that religious community, the AI will find ways for them to, number one, separate their identity, or two, leave those communities also just to find that solace elsewhere. The problem on their side is that this judgment oftentimes is not made clear, because your mind is clouded. Your brain cannot consider every single thing at that point in time. No, that we frame this in first, that the problem with the human capacity then is that you're not able to consider everything you truly believe in that particular point of time. I can know a lot of things about myself, but do I actually have it manifest in every single decision I do? No, I don't. But we suggest that this AI is the exact tool we need to actually actively remind you that perhaps maybe if it's true that you wish for a beautiful relationship in the future, but odds are you ought to opt out and you ought to do things like prioritize what brings you more happiness in the end of the day. So we think even if it's true that perhaps these things may have come with some trade-offs, we suggest that AI will make sure that that person makes the right trade-offs that actually benefits them in the end of the day. But lastly, in this idea about the singing wants to suggest about if you're an idol and if you look up to Taylor Swift and you can't sing it, you want to sing and that AI will just make you sing. Number one, I think you have to be somewhat realistic to yourself as well, right? If you don't want to be disappointed by AI in the future, then you probably have to put that reasonably, I have these set of skills, maybe I'm not going to be able to do this, but I still love Taylor Swift and Taylor Swift anyways. So the likely alternative for an art style house then is if you put that in, you don't succeed in like singing, I think also then you could just continue to be like a fan of Taylor Swift, or maybe you work in other areas close to Taylor Swift in the first place, right? If you really want to be as close to Taylor Swift as possible, I think in that case, there are probably other ways that the AI will help you achieve that in the end of the day. Note that there are a few things that they have still yet to engage with coming from our side of the house. We think decisions are hard to make panel. They are stressful and they are coerced in a lot of times. We think on our side of the house, we prevent harmful decisions from happening. Because note, the worst decisions that happen then is when the gay person chooses then to never pursue a relationship in their lives because they've internalized that it is inherently something they can never achieve. We think the fact is that we give them the avenue to actually speak their mind now that they don't have to rely on social pressure and how their life is going to go on in the future and rely on that uncertain future. Now, you can tell your AI that this is what I want to fight for, but I don't know how to do it at the end of the day. And that's why these things will eventually help you get there at the end of the day. It helps you reach your happiness and fulfill your deepest desires. But the second thing to point out is emotionality sometimes play a role in this as well. Note that we appreciate emotions exist on both sides of the house, but when you make a decision panel, sometimes you make it off decisions that you will regret at the end of the day. The fact is, I did not have to cry in that EUTH because it was still worse, and I got scolded by people for it definitely. But the thing is, this AI would then remind me that what I would have regretted more was crying in the end of the day, and maybe it would tell me to be more professional in that instance, and maybe not embarrass myself in the end of the day. I would suggest that these are all better options that AI ought to be able to make you make, because it is able to tie down to what would make you regretful in the end of the day, but also what is likely to bring you more fulfillment at the end of the day. We think then that what other things that exist then is that firstly, some passions just don't exist, right? And note that our outside the house, I think passions do exist, and just ask my whip seeker, right? Who goes to WSDC 4 times a year, right? Four times, right? I think sometimes passions do exist, and what that essentially means then is that these individuals are able to at least solidify and ensure that they don't get sidetracked. Because we framed to you in first that a lot of things are here to hinder and sidetrack you in the day. You can feel demotivated after your coach scolds you. You can feel demotivated after not winning a single tournament for almost your entire time in the circuit. But the point is, we think that ultimately, your values will tell you that you ought to continue. Your values will tell you that perhaps you do need to do something in the end of the day. Think about it, panel. We think a lot of irrational actions are happening in status quo. I want to use an example that perhaps will resonate with a lot of people, which is think of a person who is in a love that will never happen in the end of the day, panel. That person is probably too overwhelmed with emotions, probably knows what is best already, but they're too overwhelmed with emotions, and they stick to that because every moment with that person is so beautiful and it's so memorable. But in the end of the day, they have to recognize that can never happen. On their side of the house, they give in, they stay, and they have that self-sabotage themselves when they continue to be in that relationship and have to control and actually hurt their feelings even more. On our side of the house, when the AI tells you that person is probably just not right for you if that's how they're making you, and if you want a true relationship, you ought to opt out, you have to distance yourself, you have to move on. We think these are all wider actions that people will make on our side of the house. We're very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for their fine speech. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to extend upon the case for the opposition team. You're here.
panel, not a single thing that Kendall told you really even needed the AI in the first place. Just recognize that the examples Kendall gave you was, for example, a person who was queer at heart, but recognized that he was a bit confused about what was going on, and because the narrative of society told him that he was straight, that he had to be straight, but he was a bit confused, right? Hence, therefore, why do you then need an AI to tell you if you were already confused in the first place, and you would already explore the fact that you were confused about how the narrative was, right? Furthermore, recognize that when you actually look at things in the grand scheme of things, or you even just search up on the internet or ask ChatGPT why you're feeling a certain way, these things exist anyways in both sides of the house, right? So we question the real need of AI in this case, because if you are confused inherently in the first place, and that you already were going to figure out that you were queer in the end of the day, then you would figure it out on both sides of the house. This debate is not about decisions that people were going to make anyways. This debate was about decisions that people were never ever going to make, but you forced them to make it, right? Panel, recognize crucially that the reason they have to concede that people make decisions they don't want to make is because if every decision that you made on your side of the house was a decision that you wanted to make, and that you always wanted to make, then the AI never ever truly ran your life in the end of the day, but you ran your life. Therefore, they have to defend instances when people who were queer could not say they were queer because the AI didn't allow them to do so. These instances are instances that are exclusive to their side that they have to defend in the end of the day, right? But before moving on to my substantive, I'll move on to a few points of refutation. First of all, whether or not the AI is truly problematic, there's three things I want to talk about. One, on whether or not the questions that you answer were truly rational. Kendall never engages with the crux of Xingyi's framing, right? Which is number one, that when you answer the questions, you never really understood yourself. What does this mean? I think that as humans, we often feel emotions that we can't contextualize and we can't understand. For example, we can't truly explain why we love a specific girl over another girl, or we can't truly explain why it was only that specific scenario where I felt sad for some reason, right? Inherently, this means that you couldn't really explain these issues in these questions in the first place, right? But further recognize that oftentimes a lot of these emotions don't just come out at 18 or 25, but a lot of these things come out way in the future, right? Furthermore, recognize that this also cuts into the instance of the queer person, because you never ever realized and you never ever felt these queer feelings, and you never ever felt confused until you were 27, right? This means that it's really outside the questions, and you could never ever change back on this, right? But recognize that this isn't only about queer people, but it's also about people, for example, who's lived their years of 18 to 22 or 25 as an Islam or as a Muslim person, and then suddenly realized in the future that they wanted to change their religion. Recognize, panel, that this idea never ever came into their heads at all. They never recognized that they were actually wanted to change religions, for example. They never recognized that they were actually confused with their sexuality, and they never really understood that they never ever wanted to do medical studies in the first place, but it was something that their parents coerced them. Their side relies on the fact that you find out everything about yourself when you are 18 to 25, because they are able to prove this, their questions will inherently be flawed anyway, right? But furthermore, recognize that Xingyi's Taylor Swift example isn't just a Taylor Swift example, right? Let's extend this to even worse examples. For example, sometimes we have crushes from 18 to 25, right? And we recognize that this person that we love is really so important to us, right? But when we turn outside of 25, our priorities change, because we recognize, one, that this person brutally rejected you, for example, or number two, that you prioritize other things now, for example, money, over that person that you really love, right? Inherently, because priorities, values, and preferences change, that's why you can't defend these things on your side house. Go, Pim.
External circumstances change things. If you still wanted family, under our side of the house, you would get family because you will want them. If you, for example, were really, really ugly, or like no one loves you anyways, then AI would just say, no. Wait. You say that in some external factors can cause people not to want to have other people, or not, for example, like it doesn't align with other values anymore. Under those circumstances, why doesn't the AI tell you that you won't want to get family in the first place?
Because one, the AI didn't really understand your circumstances, because you put in the value that you said you stuck in with your whole life. You can't resubmit a new set of questions, because if you resubmit a new set of questions, you are controlling your own life, panel. If you constantly change your mind and you don't really do what AI told you to do in the first place, then who is running your life? Is it the AI or is it the person? If my values constantly change and I never did what the AI told you, then what's the difference on both sides of the house? If everything that you do is what I was gonna do anyways, they have to defend once again decisions that AI makes you do that you never wanted to do. That's the only way that they can get their benefit on their side of the house. No thank you, NGRE to P. Okay, let's talk about the second issue then, on the idea of changing minds, right? Once again, we think that decisions that you make changes all the time, right? Sometimes you can't make decisions, and sometimes therefore, the decisions will change over time, where there are still changes and still intuition changes in your life at the end of the day, right? But furthermore, let's talk about again, the person who was queer. Essentially, One, we think a huge harm that comes from this is oftentimes you regret the decisions that you make. And when you regret the decisions you make, that you suffer the brunt of these effects, right? Oftentimes, right, panel, we think that you have to take into account the things that society tells you. Why is this case? Because you are not making these decisions in a vacuum. You're making these decisions with the narrative that society has put into place. Recognize that this narrative will also still interact with you. So you cannot just say that I will completely ignore the fact that my government just started to criminalize gay people and that my government just suddenly began to completely kill off and stone people who are gay. So I therefore still want to stick with my narrative anyway, and I still want to stick with my values. This means that sometimes the narratives that society gives you needs to be adapted to, and you need to adapt to these narratives, these new things that society essentially does to you, right? Which means that you can't stick to an idea and you can't stick to a value that you decided when you were 18 to 25. You need to adapt to society, and they never adapt to society, right? Finally, let's deal with this really weird point of free will. One, you never really had free will in the end of the day. Every decision that you made was inherently not free because society coerced you to do things, because society has things that makes your decisions not free. Second of all, when you answer these questions anyways, you answer these questions without free will. Because you answer these questions with society coercing you. The reason why they're able to say these things is because they assume, panel, that you recognize that these coercions are or you actually recognize that these coercions exist in the first place. Recognize, panel, that a lot of times these narratives exist in our heads unconsciously, that we don't recognize that these coercions even existed in our head in the first place. And this means that when we answer these questions in the end of the day, you still include the coercions that narratives tell you. You still recognize that your feeling of confusion was never ever valid in the first place because that's what society told you, and you didn't realize that this confusion was not valid. Go on, Jay.
Our case was about having a little voice in your head that was right at all times. All the time then, so this voice couldn't be heard because society's voice was too loud. You have to prove why that little voice was still
One, if that voice was little, that voice never existed in the AI's decisions. Two, if that voice was truly as impactful as you told me to be, the voice is symmetrical. The voice will come up in the end of the day if the voice was really so impactful in the first place. But think about it again, if the voice was really so small, then AI would give less priority to that voice and the more priority to the large voice, the overwhelming voice that you prioritize, because the AI prioritizes what you want to do. And you told the AI that although I feel like confused, I don't think that this matters a lot, right? But second of all, let's engage with this, or let's talk about my substantive here on why you lose all humanity on your side. Panel, I think the reason why humanity functions as a society is because we're able to interact and influence other people around us, right? It is because we're able to have proper constructive decisions or proper constructive conversations that change people's minds is what makes us human, right? Because panel, without the ability to interact and without the ability to tell someone that, hey, today I want McDonald's, I don't want KFC, that's exactly how we make friends in society in today's house, right? Panel, what happens is when the AI recognizes and forces you to make decisions that you never ever wanted to make in the first place, and forces you to make decisions to not interact and not believe in these new things that society, that your friends tell you and make you believe, that's exactly when you lose all humanity, because you don't realize or you don't actually believe in new things and you aren't able to interact with the society, you aren't able to function as a community, and that's when you lose all sense of community in humanity. Because of all these reasons, oppose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for their fine speech. I'd like to welcome the government whip to end the substantive portion of the case for the government team. Here, here.
And 2. At the end of this round, we get one clear benefit. Is that we get the deepest desires that we have, even though it might not be perfectly inputted. But then we make sure that throughout our lives we fulfill those impacts, and if I can prove in my speech that those values are likely to change, while the things that like coffee and tea, much less valuable to the round. I have 2 clashes in my speech. First, are people likely to input beliefs and preferences that they most deeply desire? And then I'll chat about like inside this about can AI be effective. Second clash, do people make decisions that they truly want to make and want to deal with the worst cases where AI forces you to do something that you might not want to? First question, are people likely to input beliefs and preferences that they most deeply desire? Here, Jetty says that sexuality is something that people get over time. Like, obviously it's pretty controversial to some people, but I believe it's pretty objectively clear that the majority of instances, you are born with it. And we think that in the instance where, for example, you might feel that you are confused, we tell you since first speaker how this AI is likely to operate. Why? Because the framing is very simple. They don't just ask you, are you queer and why not? And okay, cool, so what now, right? It asks you basically, are you queer? It asks you basically, do you want to come out? They ask you basically, what do your friends and family talk to you about? What are your fundamental beliefs? And for example, gives you scenarios that they can make up in the future as to whether you want to come out or not under those circumstances. Kendo makes it very clear that AI is also not that stupid, that AI has learned fundamental human emotions too, and know that, for example, when people are confused, they make answers that are, for example, do not sound the most truthful or do not sound the most genuine and honest. For example, you can see the reluctancy in the English answer input that they do so under our side of the house. We tell you then that in the instances where things are unclear and not sure, they can say where those things are unsure and unclear. For instance, they won't ask you, for example, like coffee or tea. I think that's a pretty dumb idea. But maybe they want to say, for example, that which cuisines do you like, for example. But then I don't think that those ones matter the most in the round. I think the ones that matter the most were, for example, no thank you, fundamental values like, do you want family? I think it was pretty clear that in your 20s, you understand what family means to you, knowing that you have lived in this structure before, and the majority of cases you can weigh out pros and cons whether to why you as an individual want a family or not. And I think it's very, very clear here. Because for instance, for me, I don't know what job I'm going to do. I don't know if I have enough money to raise a child, but I want a child because I've been through a very happy family with my parents, and I want to give the same happiness to future individuals and raise a child. That is very meaningful to me. Those values are things that we think can be inputted into AI. Thirdly, the most deepful desires can be get under ours of the house because the framing that we told you that this technology would question you this way. We told you that it wasn't just about one day. It was about, for example, 3 months, 2 months, 4 months, that these answers can change over time. But we think that these questions are likely to be deep and likely to be things that, for example, question the fundamental reasons why you want certain things. And we think that, for example, maybe circumstances change in the future, but those circumstances, for example, should not deter me from wanting a family in the first place. So I'll talk about that later. Anyways here, even if it wasn't perfect, why do we think that this is likely to be the deepest desire? Because they talk about adaptability of your and fundamental values over time. We think then that, for example, being a good person, for example, wanting to have a family and all of these things, for example, like having a certain religion, are things that are unlikely to be adaptive. But what we think that they're talking about adaptive in this debate are things like, for example, your daily decisions that are adaptive over time. We think then that those things are, for example, determined on external circumstances where it's likely to be adapted to, and therefore, in those circumstances, it is adaptive under ours of the house when we take in the circumstances and we take in, for example, the fundamental core beliefs that you have. So under those circumstances, it can be adaptive and you can have a growth mindset. So clearing that out, the AI is likely to be good and it's likely to be adaptive for individuals in the long run. Second clash then. This AI, can it make the decisions that people most want to make in the status quo? Firstly, let's clear on external factors. Because NJ's material makes it very, very clear that some external factors are not very good to individuals. For instance, firstly, people have the little voice in their head, which very, very conveniently, they never responded to. When we talk to you, for example, when you doom scroll instead of going out to your family dinner to spend time with the people that value you the most, or for example, me sitting down, like watching Ryan Lafferty before this tournament instead of going to hang out with my friends for a vastly extended period of time. I think I lost a lot of my values in my life, and for that reason, I think that this voice would retain those fundamental values. Therefore, when NJ also talks about societal values, these are very, very important. Why? Because if the societal narrative was uniquely coercive and not good for the individual in terms of their values, it's very likely that the AI would not take it into consideration. But in what Kendall tell you is that if some societal narratives, for example, like criminalizing gay people, I think that under those circumstances, the AI would take those circumstances into consideration and know that it outweighs, for example, your fundamental values. I think, therefore, that these things can change over time, but the preferences of individuals stay the same. I'll tell you in a moment. And therefore, external factors are things that we think are important, but those external factors are what prevents you from getting the most important things in your life. Shout out to people. I think I've done things that, for example, I might not want to do in the short run, but now I'm here and I'm quite happy to be here, and I believe that your deepest and most fulfilled desires happen when there is a guideline to make sure that your worst little voice in your head does not come up. This little voice is likely to be a little voice that is likely to be quite bad, and even if it's good, those little good things would exist under our side as well. Furthermore, on free will, no thank you. Shetty has a little extension, which I really thought he would push so much because he's like, I'm such a philosophical guy, but he didn't push it that much. But anyways, individuals still, which I'll preempt, individuals still have control over what they do. For example, the AI tells you to go to this debate tournament and debate it this way, like debate at this competition, and you can still, for example, formulate those things. Or for example, the AI tells you to come out now and you follow it, and then you still have that agency, like you still know, you still control the process of coming out, but more importantly, you know that you worked hard for certain things and you know those were still the fruits of your labor. That's why NJ's points about being very, very, finding a lot of meaning at the end of your life was so important. Because you look back in your life and you know the things that you have done and the sacrifices that you have made, even though those sacrifices, for example, were guided, but it was your process of going through all those processes to know, for example, that I have found a lot of meaning living with my family. I found a lot of meaning, for example, working hard in my job, and I found a lot of meaning in humanitarian work. Before I move on, information.
External factors and your prioritization and weighing of them are subjective. Why then should we allow AI to then weigh subjectively since we can't put in new information?
Okay, I agree. Sometimes AI might not make the best decisions. But what we think is about consistency and certainty of impact. Because what we tell you under our side of the house is that you weigh things and preferences since the time that you assess these things. So even if, therefore, sometimes they might make the wrong mistake, the majority of instances they do make the correct trade-off, which Kendall talked about. For instance, if you really, really want to come out as a queer individual, and for example, you value your family a tiny bit less than that, it's very likely that the AI will make it the correct trade-off for you, in which you would never do under your side of the house because you were supremely scared about other things that would prevent you from getting what you fully and your deepest desires. Therefore, on the impact of this clash, it was very, very clear that individuals are much more happy in our life because people get to pursue what they want in the status quo. There are so many barriers that don't allow them to pursue those things. It was only in our side of the house that external factors can, for example, influence decisions, but don't influence decisions to make sure that you stray away from the fundamental values that makes your life meaningful. Sometimes we strive for meaning, and I'm very, very proud to be here. And yay! Grand final, second time, please win. Very, very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for their fine speech. I'd like to welcome the opposition whip to give us a second portion of the case for the opposition team. You're clear.
Am I audible? Proposition believes that life is a simple equation that can be reduced by a formula. We tell you life is way more than that. It's about the lived experiences of my journey as a debater, it's about my failures of losing debate round, and it's about my victory of Anglo to winning grand finals in this round. Life is so subjective, you simply cannot objectify something subjective, you cannot objectify a subjective matter. Proud to propose. Two clashes in this debate. The first is the AI truly reliable? And secondly, which side better to character development of the average reasonable debater in this debate? Firstly, is the AI truly reliable? I will break this clash into two parts. Firstly, let's talk about filling the form itself, right? This process of you answering the questions that AI will ask you under their side of the house. We told you AI was never accurate from the point you filled the form in the very first place in 3 ways. Firstly, the same indecisive people that they want to defend under their side of the house, the same people that they want to protect, most of the time don't know what to answer in the very first place. They don't have a purpose in life, right? Like people like Jenny, for example, who don't know what job he wants to pursue in the future. We think that under their side of the house, most of the time, you're going to be really ambiguous with your own feelings with what you're going to answer to the AI. But secondly then, even when you do know something, most of the time, people lack self-understanding and more importantly, are inherent bias. Like let's say, for example, I might think that I'm an introverted person, but everyone in this auditorium here might think that I'm an extroverted person, right? We think that at the end of the day, you're going to answer these questions within your personal biases, and then at the end of the day, you're only going to get like the answers that fit into like your personal interests as opposed to like the true objective answer. But thirdly then, as they conceive themselves, we think that identity change over time, right? And the fact that under their side of us, this firstly, the answer will not likely update, you cannot retake the quiz. But secondly then, we believe that under their side of the house here then, the fact that your identity changes, like you cannot like re-answer the question anymore, right? We think that the results that you get under your side of the house are not going to be as objective anymore. Sure.
Your entire case hinges on the fact that the AI is stupid. You have to engage and you have to prove that in the instance where the AI is effective, why you still wouldn't allow it to run your life.
We don't think AI is stupid. We think AI is smart. It is objective. What is stupid is the fact that the answer that you fill in these forms were never objective in the very first place, and therefore the answers that you get from these AI were never accurate too. They told you a few things. They told you that firstly, under their side of house, they can give extensive time to people in answering these questions. Note that this was brought up in Kendo and dropped in P. I have 2 responses to this. Firstly, the moment that they want to co-opt this benefit under their side of house, they concede to the fact that there is indeed a problem and indeed a chance of you being unhappy with the result, and there's a chance of you wanting to change your mind. But secondly then, at the point in which you give people so extensive time in answering these questions, that is the point at which you're going to overthink yourself, and then like at the end of the day, like the results are probably going to contradict itself. Sure.
We tell you that the AI will ask questions to understand you. We tell you that they will ask extensive questions to understand you, even though right now your service level might not have self-understanding. So at the very end of our assessment, you get very, very deep assessment as to what individuals want and their deepest desires.
Yeah, but that assessment only applies to who you are at that point in time. We think that people change. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. Second level of this clash and the result and the decision it makes itself. I think that we made it really clear why it would even generate the right decision in the very first place. But we tell you that even if it's right, it's likely bad in 5 ways. We think that firstly, we told you that it is likely a black box model, right? You know the input, you know the output, but you never know how the AI have the calculus to process the information in the very first place. But secondly then, this leads to the fact that this machine is likely unaccountable under your side of the house, especially given that you're probably not going to question the AI. But thirdly then, we think that on this idea of the value of human right, we simply believe that it is unjustified to have an inanimate object to assess who we are as a person, especially we have many facets, many aspects towards who we are as an individual. But fourthly then, we think that how the society works is more than just yes and no, right? We think that was only under our side of house where we interact with other individuals to make different decisions, right? It was only under our side of house where we were able to socialize with other people to make negotiations, to make concessions in order to make the fruitful and the most harmonious decision under our side of the house. But fifthly and most importantly, right, the AI, right, we think that this AI under your side of the house will likely act within your self-interest and not necessarily the greatest utility of the society, right? And therefore, we believe that the worst people under your side of the house will likely manipulate the AI to justify their own actions. They told you that under their side of the house, they have the fiat to assume that the AI will not accept BS and the AI will likely be smart. I have 2 strategic responses to this. I think that firstly, their fiat simply cannot replace your lack of mechanization. But secondly then, I believe that even if we dig deeper into the fiat and dissipate, it only assumes that the AI will be able to be objective and process the information properly. It never said that the AI will actually be accurate. But second passion is debate on which side betters the character development of the average reasonable voter. Firstly, I just want to make it clear once again that the metric in this debate, right, this debate isn't necessarily just about people who selectively listen to the words of AI, right? But we think that this debate is about those individuals who are subservient to the AI and the system itself. Because if you notice the wording of the motion, allowing AI to run your life means you integrate it into your cognitive judgment process and your decision-making calculus, right? We think that it's different to selectively use the AI in only in like certain instances, we think that this is the difference on both sides of the house. And given so, we claim a few benefits on our side. We think that firstly, it was only under our side of the house where we learned from our past mistakes, right? This was also left unresponded coming from under their side of the house. We tell you that under our side of the house, sure, life is not perfect. There will likely be certain instances where we fail. There will likely be certain instances where like life is like so bad, like you just want to kill yourself, right? But then at the end of the day, because of the fact that life is so bad, you understand why that incident was so problematic in the very first place, and therefore you don't want to put yourself in the same situation again. But more importantly then, we think that the very fact that you were able to cope and move on from that particular issue already proves to a certain level that you have already grown as a person under our side of the house. But lastly then, we think that it was only under our side of the house where we were willing to take high risk and we are able to get high reward. What does this mean then? Like let's say for example, if you own a company and you want to invest so much, it was only when you invest so much that you can get like so much benefits, so much revenue in return in the very first place. AI will tell you under their side of the house, you are poor and therefore there's a really low chance for you to succeed. And therefore under their side of the house, AI is going to tell you don't invest as much. And that is the point at which under their side of the house, you're not going to get as much as revenue to improve your company in the very first place. They told you two things. Firstly, they told you you are already happy to opt into the AI in the very first place. But secondly, they told you you now have the agency because you're able to manifest the little voices you have in your head. I have two structural responses to this, and I want to note that whatever they said here wasn't even direct to what we claim under our side of the house. The first is, we think the moment that you say that people are already happy to opt into the AI, it concedes to a certain level that people are willing to blindly follow AI under their side of the house. But secondly then, I just want to question, do we even have agency in the very first place? We tell you, we never had agency in the very first place. We were constantly coerced by like the third party third party coercion in this debate, right? What is exclusive under our side of the house is the fact that you were truly able to do from what you wanted, as opposed to having the AI act as an intermediary to interpret what you actually want in this debate. But lastly then, even if we accept their premise that life will suck, life will go under their side of the house, at least we have the learning process to understand why something were good and bad, and at least we're not the ones becoming the pawns on the chessboard controlled by AIs, and therefore I have never been prouder to oppose.
Speaker for their fine speech. I'd like to move to the reply section of this debate and welcome the opposition reply to end the case for the opposition team. Here, here.
Once again, what they had to do was to then defend decisions that the guy itself didn't want to make. Because again, if you made every decision you wanted to make, then that's symmetrical, because you're still in control of your life. Once again, they have to make and defend decisions that they didn't want to make. The problem with this then is that sometimes, yeah, the decisions that you didn't want to make ended up well, but most of the time, they don't. And that's exactly what they don't defend, and that's exactly why they are incredibly uncharitable. Two things I'm going to talk about. One, the principle that they never engage with, and two, whether or not they actually make decisions that they want. One, we don't think, okay, first of all, they have to defend decisions they don't want to make, but second of all, importantly, fundamental values change. We give you multiple examples. One, that you sometimes change your religion. That means every single core value that you have changes. For example, a conservative Christian can suddenly decide to be a liberal atheist when she or he turns 40, for example. We think this is incredibly realistic, and this actually does happen in real life. What happens to these people then on their house? They're stuck. They are stuck and are unable to escape, and that's the harm that they had to defend. They never weighed this. We think we've proven this to you since birth already. Second of all, this small issue that they continuously talk about how do you get there? First, I think this is very unfair, right? Because I think that if you really had a goal in mind and you wanted to get that goal, then you could use things like Google, you could ask your friends how to get there. Anyways, we give you many examples, right? We think that this issue wasn't a real issue in the first place, right? So second of all, and more importantly, the more important part of their arguments then was this idea that there are little things in their head. And sometimes AI will magically bring these little things in your head out even though they were little. So then, for me, right, I think it's very unintuitive, because then what does the AI bring out, and when does the AI bring up these issues? Because if it was true that these issues were truly little, and that you didn't prioritize them, because the fact that they were little means you didn't prioritize them ever, then why is the AI suddenly prioritizing them out of nowhere? Because panel, you literally told the AI that this was a little thing, this is not an important thing, that's why it was small in your head. Then why is the AI suddenly bringing this out of nowhere? It is very unclear why the AI will suddenly want to do this, right? Because they will still prioritize the things that you say are important to you. So why will then the AI bring these issues up? Their black box mechanism that they have on their side is exactly why they can't defend any decisions they want to make, because we don't know how these decisions are made. Importantly, this also means that when external factors come into play, again, you rely on the AI to then weigh off these external factors themselves, because you never told the AI when you were 18 to 25 that, hey, if in case one day the government suddenly had a law that they would criminalize all queers, then I would want to do this instead. Then what you do is you leave this ultimately entirely up to the AI, and you rely on the fact that AI makes the decision for you, which is very likely to fail in the end of the day, right? But importantly then, under this class, what are some issues that they refuse to engage with in the whole debate? One, we tell you that the emotions that you feel sometimes that you don't understand and yet you don't feel right now that come up randomly in your life, right? And we tell you that you have to defend these issues anyways. Second of all, we told you that sometimes you will have to step out of your comfort zone because you told the AI that these things you never wanted to do, that you were always an introvert, you never ever stood out of your comfort zone. Recognize that this also includes, and this is being charitable, because even if the AI was truly perfect, you still never was able to step out of your comfort zone. But three, again, that you have to make mistakes to grow, which means that even if the AI was perfect, we don't think a perfect life is truly perfect in the end of the day, that you still have to make these mistakes. This is being charitable. They can't just say that we're not being charitable, right? Because therefore, this means that they still have harms on their side anyways, you don't truly live a fulfilling life, right? Let's talk about the principle then, that they again never engage with. One, that you should never ever let an inanimate object control your life, because then we lose all sense of humanity, then we are no longer human because we cannot control what we wanted to do, right? But importantly, second of all, you never ever understood your own emotions in the end of the day, and then you never ever was able to consult your friends in the end of the day, and that's why you lose all interaction, and that's why you lose all humanity. They had to engage on this, and because they dropped so many of my first speaker's analysis, that's exactly why they cannot get the benefits that they want to claim, and they don't truly defend the burden that they have to defend on their self-house. That is why we should never ever use this AI. Part to oppose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for their fine reply, and I'd like to welcome the government reply to end the debate. Here.
Other than the new impacts in reply and new material in WIP, what else do you need to observe from their case panel? What we need to observe is they don't provide you a reason why people on their side of the house are any less likely to be coerced by those values. Listen to their own rhetoric panel. The rhetoric was, but your values change over time. We told you and grounded you in first that number one, we framed out most of these people who are unsure. Because if you're so uncertain, you probably don't want to opt in. But people who are somewhat certain and maybe uncertain in some areas, you know what? Let's deal with that idea. We think that for these individuals, number one, most of their harms are already mitigated. But what is more important then is that if you've already solidified your values, was it the case that your values changed, or was society telling you that that was a new you that you had to be? We think this was a distinction that they never answered. It fits very nicely to our claim that oftentimes your decisions and your changes are inherently coerced by society. We think that at the end of the day, you ought to prioritize what makes you feel better, and we gave you reasons why on our side how you're likely to do so. First, is AI like to be reliable? Second, on rationality, and last on the degree of change, and last on the weighing in their best case. First, is AI likely to change? I think we provide you, they need to be charitable here. I think AI probably understands the capacity for humans to, number one, be reasonable, but two, for humans to input values like how they are open-minded, how they're able to be changed, how they sometimes are able to do things like have a growth mindset and want to learn from their mistakes. These are values that people have had, not just things that they can just straw man and say that people will never learn from their values, because I don't think you inherently, if that is the case, then we don't need to defend that. So we need to support an AI that answers so many questions about you, that make you recognize and realize who you are, that make you answer genuinely and truly answer what you truly believe in. We think that if you have uncertainties in certain areas, that AI will probably take it into consideration. That's why on our side of the house, these things will be resolved in the future. Because Jenny's analysis was, because their taking from opposition bench was that they simplify humans panel. We don't think they're that simple. You deep down may know something is right, but you are not sure how it manifests, you're not sure how it surfaces. That is exactly what the sexuality example Jenny gave you talks about, right? Deep down you may be gay. But in the end of the day, do you actually accept it? Do you actually recognize it? It's a completely different issue. And odds are, if you're not sure, you put that in the AI, and the AI oftentimes will probably lead you to that solution and actually make you understand. It's not like you can be so clear cut that I'm definitely not this or that, right? So odds are, we think the AI will help you find that in the end of the day. We think they can adapt to a degree, also because AI itself has to adapt to things. Decision making in general does have to adapt to things like external circumstances and how you external circumstances in the end of the day. But however, it is a matter of how does that external circumstance interact with who you are and your values in the end of the day. We think when you've already opted in, you already solidified some of your values. We think we're happy to spend that. But know that in the cases where, even if it's true that sometimes the AI will fail panel, we think at the very least, you are still on your same path. You're still on track, right? You're still on the path to doing what you want in the end of the day, because it's still doing something that makes you resonate, that resonates in you in the end of the day. No, you can just put in that doing good for society makes you feel good. In the end of the day, even if it's true, it messes up in the small things, you're still able to get a lot of fulfillment from doing things that you truly enjoy. Second on rationality panel, their claim was that, when situations change, and then I don't know, when being gay is now illegal, people would still want to come out in the end of the day. Panel, I think we already analyzed this, right? The reason why AI is more rational, because it does make the way up for you instead. Notice that if it is true that having these laws is going to hinder your ability to express yourself and coming out may get stoned, then odds are the AI will make the decision that you shouldn't come out right now and wait till circumstances clear. Then only then do you come out. Only then can you continue to live your life and actually get those meaningful relationships in the long run. We told you about how other values will have to be put in place, and you often have to add nuances, right? This AI is a complicated panel. You're able to add details and add nuances as to how much these values mean to you. Meaning that if you value things like relationships panel, and that is the overwhelming thing, odds are in the end of the day, the AI will still shift you and gear you towards that in the end of the day. So that's why on their side of the house, things that don't align with your most deepest values, even if you put that in the other answers, the AI will just recognize it as probably things that don't align, and they'll pick the value that's more important to you and make sure you fulfill those values in the end of the day. We think then that the degree at which the people will opt in changes is number one, minimal, but number two, we ran through a case that we should prove to you by things like social constructs inherently dilute the ability for a person to make judgments. We think on our side, the AI is the active reminder in your head that you ought to stick to your plans, you ought to weigh this in the end of the day, because our side provides people with their deepest darkest desires. We're very proud to propose.
Across the floor, shake hands, and the judges will confirm. We're going separate. We still need the decision for.
Take up.